Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. In this episode, I really want to look at the steps the United States has taken to challenge China in the continent of Africa. I'm talking about why the US have decided to use the Lobito Corridor as an opportunity for them to engage the continent infrastructurally. Make no mistake, China's footprint in the continent of Africa is massive. China has demonstrated that it is out for business. It has constructed ports, railways, dams, a number of very important infrastructure across the region. And for the United States of America to come out boldly under the administration of Joe Biden to tell the African people that they really want to engage. But let me say this, if the United States of America cannot deliver the Lobito Corridor, if the US cannot show the continent of Africans people that it can talk and do, then the geopolitical disaster that the United States will find itself will be huge. But why Lobito is so talked about? Well, it's the most consequential project that the United States and its partners want to showcase the continent of Africa that they can deliver. But before we dive into the nitty-gritties with regards to this very important project that all eyes in Africa are watching, allow me give you a quick background. Lobito was announced through the European Union and the United States joint statement in the margins of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, known as the PGI, the event at the G20 in India in September of 2023. The Lobito Corridor is a key priority under the G7's PGI. The European Union and the United States of America are co-leading the support for the corridor's development, including infrastructure investment, soft measures for trade and transit facilitation, investment in related sectors to foster sustainable and inclusive growth, and capital investment, agriculture and value chains, energy, transportation and logistics, technical and vocational education and training, along with the corridor in Angola, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Zambia. China has faced a number of criticisms based on its infrastructural development and growth and engaging Africa, from debt trapping, from other criticisms. But the Lobito Corridor is a consequential project that the United States have talked a lot, especially now that there is a new administration coming into place. Who knows what happened if Donald Trump and cannot deliver or follow through to the Lobito Corridor project? I think the continent of Africa, especially those particular countries, Angola, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Zambia, they will review the African relationship or their individual partnerships with the United States of America. Folks, we are at a critical time in history where the continent of Africa is making strategic choices to engage partners that come with a win-win. The Lobito Corridor is something that the United States thinks, according to experts, they can prove to the continent that they mean business, that they can deliver on projects.
Joe Biden has become the first U.S. president to visit Angola. It's also his first state visit to Africa during his administration. The trip is aimed at strengthening ties between the two countries and promoting U.S. investments. And at the heart of Biden's visit is the Lobito Corridor, a new international railway connecting the city of Lobito on Angola's Atlantic coast to Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The aim is to ease the export of minerals. And this $5 billion investment is the largest U.S.-funded infrastructure project in Africa, and some see it as Washington's attempt to counter Chinese influence on the continent. From Washington, D.C., we're joined now by journalist and commentator Reddy Hlabi. Thank you for joining us, Reddy. Why, in your opinion, do you think this Lobito project is so important to the U.S.?
Thank you so much for having me. Well, this is a very important visit for Biden. I mean, he's in the twilight of his presidency, and yet he ventured out to a country in Southern Africa. It is strategically important to the United States for two reasons. The United States relies on Africa for some minerals that it needs to power electric vehicles. It needs Africa's mineral resources, notably cobalt, nickel, oil, and Angola is rich in both. So while Biden is in Angola, he is going to announce a very ambitious and multi-billion Lobito Corridor development project. What is this one? It is a crucial rail project that links mineral-rich Zambia, Congo, and Angola to the Atlantic. That means that the United States can move these assets with ease towards its shores so that it can power its economy. That's on the economic front. On the geopolitical front, this visit is so important because the United States has been fast asleep when it comes to Africa. It has not been purposeful and intentional in investing in Africa. What was the result of that? China took advantage of the vacuum that was created by the United States, and China has made some significant diplomatic and economic strides on the African continent, extending loans to countries like Kenya, like Zambia, and others. These countries are, of course, indebted, but it allowed China to have influence on the African continent, which is something that causes a lot of anxiety to the United States.
China has constructed hundreds of thousands of kilometers of railways and infrastructure in the continent of Africa, investing billions of US dollars. There are a number of American companies in the continent. The US is involved in some collaborative projects in the continent, no doubt. But I'm talking about the Lobito Corridor because there's been a Lobito fever in the past couple of months and years, especially when the US president visited the country of Angola. Everyone thought the United States has arrived. Of course, they mean business regards to this because the US needs Africa in that particular area. But make no mistake, Chinese are observing the Lobito project. The Russians are observing the Lobito project. The European Unions are watching the Lobito project. The Japanese are watching the Lobito project. African continent is watching the Lobito project. Middle Eastern partners, India, and if the United States cannot cut the ribbon and deliver the project, it will be devastating in terms of the geopolitical engagement. That could even go a long way if it backfires. I mean, if it backfires based on the eyes that are on that particular project, and if the Lobito was just done as a result of strategically projecting power, showing that we too can involve Africa, we can engage the continent, then that would have been a fundamental blunder in terms of geopolitical relationship. So, let's say the United States of America deliver on the Lobito project. Then, it sends a signal that we too can, to an extent, get involved and execute projects. But if the United States of America fundamentally blunders with regards to this, what would the Chinese say? We told you that they can't deliver, they cannot match our footprint. Listen, China's relationship in Africa goes back to since 1991. Chinese foreign ministers have been in the continent, 1 year in particular. Recently, he was in the continent touring. Every January, Chinese foreign minister goes to the continent and to remind the African people's relationship with China that we are here to do business and we really want to scale this relationship to a whole different level.
We'll touch on China in just a second, a bit more, but for Angola, I'm guessing, what do you think they would be wanting from this relationship, from this project, from the US at the moment?
It was actually quite surprising that there was a bid for this railway project, and China did also bid, but Angola went with the United States. I think it recognizes that the United States is still the most powerful nation in the world militarily and in other ways, and a lot of countries still remain vulnerable to civil strife internally, and so the United States often comes in with military support, humanitarian aid, and so on. But I also think there's another factor that is important, and that is there are historic relationships between countries that were supported by the Soviet Union, which is of course now Russia and others, and the United States during the Cold War. What is important here is that the Soviet Union backed the current government of Angola. So you would have thought that they would turn against the United States and go with China and so on. But there is a certain sentiment that is sweeping through some African countries, and that is the non-aligned kind of stance that says we're no longer in the Cold War period. And I believe that Joe Biden's spokesperson said that to journalists who were traveling with him, that we're not in the Cold War. Africa doesn't have to choose between Russia, China, and the United States. We are looking for economic ties, and it reminds me of something that William Ruto, the president of Kenya, said to me in a recent visit to the US during his state visit. I asked him whether they are pivoting away from China and towards the United States, and I think it is relevant for Angola as well. And his answer to me was, we are not looking east, we are not looking west, we are looking forward. So I think for Angola, they do want to cement those good relationships with the United States.
So the Lobito Corridor is the most consequential engagement that the United States have gotten itself into the continent of Africa. In the geopolitical circles, it may be a normal announcement. In other media, it could be a normal announcement. But from the strategic engagement point of view, Africans are watching the Lobito Corridor like nothing before. If the US fails, it's done. If the United States fails to deliver Lobito to the classic standard that China has continuously proven that it can cut the red bone across the region, it can deliver over and over, then there's going to be a problem in terms of US project and engagement in the continent of Africa.
On the issue of China, isn't the US a bit late in the game, considering the gains China has made over the past couple of decades?
Mm-hmm. The US is late in the game, but here's the thing. It is not in Africa's interest to just look to one partner. It is not good for our economies. We need to diversify. We need to have a plurality of options. We need to fill our basket with a whole lot of options, just as China is doing. So I don't think that, the Angola should be worried about who's coming in. It should be about economic returns and strengthening those economic ties. And talking about the United States being late, of course it is late, but it is also worried about the rise of China, and it wants to kind of truncate or frustrate China's advances on the African continent.
On that note, I'll take you back a few years. When Donald Trump came to power, he looked at Africa through the lens of China and Russia. When Joe Biden became president, he didn't necessarily depart from that. In fact, this is at the end of his presidency when he is making that first journey to an sub-Saharan African country. Where does this place Africa in terms of priority when it comes to the US?
That's such a brilliant question because it speaks to a multiplicity of things. The first is that my understanding of US foreign policy is that it often doesn't matter who's in the White House. The US has particular pillars to its foreign policy. They see themselves as a country of dominance, as a strong country, as it were, the arbiter of who's democratic and who's not. They use the economic and military might to influence how the world is structured. And so whether it's a Biden presidency, an Obama presidency, or a Trump presidency, it still comes with those kind of values that are intrinsic to US foreign policy since the end of the Cold War. I want to say one final thing on this. Joe Biden saw this trip as a necessary venture. People are saying, but he won, he lost, the Democrats lost the election, and he humiliatingly had to withdraw in July at the very last minute. Why does he bother going on the state visit? Precisely because of what you mentioned when we started this conversation, the crucial Lobito Corridor. And also, I think that Joe Biden's administration would have calculated that this corridor would be important for Trump as well from the point of view of China's dominance. We know this. We know that Donald Trump is obsessed obsessed with cutting China down to size. And if he also sees the Lobito Corridor as a way of closing the door to China, then he will run with it and build on it from where Joe Biden took off.
These are strategic times that Africa is making some fundamental changes, from the Sahel region to economic partnerships, to selecting its own partners, looking for win-win partners, and actually reviewing projects. Every country in Africa has its own challenges, and the collaborations, they are different. So looking at Africa from a one lens or one size fits all will be a big mistake. So it goes back to the Lobito project. The Atlantic Corridor is a very important corridor for not just US aim to seek for natural resources exportation from the region, but from these three very important countries. And the US want to project itself. But again, like I said, if these projects continuously being delayed and cannot be delivered at the right time, that based on that Joe Biden in the last months of his presidency will make such a move, and at the end of the day politics may come in and then the Lobito is not followed through, that will be devastating for the United States of America. And Africa will once again come forward and say that the United States engagement in the continent of Africa has been clouded as a result of China and Russia. Leave me a comment and let's talk about this, and let's keep the conversation going as we continue to monitor the progress of the Lobito Corridor. I want to thank you for watching. I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.